All right, let's get right into it. If you're involved in SEPA payments in any capacity, this is a briefing you'll want to pay close attention to. We are breaking down a really important compliance warning that's come directly from the European Payments Council, and it's something that affects all scheme participants. So, here it is. The EPC has put out an official communication, letter EPC027-25. And you should think of this as a direct warning shot to everyone participating in the SEPA Credit Transfer and Instant Credit Transfer schemes. It's flagging a major and apparently growing compliance problem that honestly threatens the integrity of the whole SEPA system. And this quote gets right to the heart of the matter. The EPC is saying point blank that some participants are misusing the schemes and breaking the rules they agreed to follow. We're not talking about a minor technical slip-up here. This is a fundamental breach of how these payment systems are supposed to work. So what is this breach they're so concerned about? Well, it has a name, the one-leg out problem. Let's break down exactly what this practice is and why it's causing such a stir. Okay, that's the official definition, but what does it mean in plain English? At its core, a one-leg out transaction happens when an international payment, one that's coming from or going outside of SEPA, is jammed into the SEPA system improperly. The key violation here is that the real sender or receiver doesn't actually have an account with the SEPA participant who's processing it. So here's how it plays out. An international transfer is basically cut in half. First, money comes in from outside the SEPA zone, say the US or China, to a payment service provider in SEPA. Then, that PSP creates a totally new SEPA transfer. And here's the critical part, the violation. Instead of listing the actual international sender, the PSP just lists itself as the originator. And the result of doing this? It completely breaks the information chain. The true identity of the person who sent the money and where those funds originally came from is hidden from the final bank. This creates a massive transparency gap. Now, this lack of transparency isn't just a simple data problem. It creates some really severe compliance risks. This practice isn't just a threat to the individual companies involved, it's a threat to the stability of the entire SEPA framework. The first and maybe most obvious risk is a total failure in anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing controls. I mean, without the real sender's information, how can the beneficiary's bank possibly do its due diligence? They're essentially flying blind. And that, of course, leads directly to the next huge risk, sanctions screening evasion. A payment from a sanctioned entity could be disguised to look like a perfectly clean, normal transaction from within SEPA. And with the new instant payments regulation coming in 2025, this vulnerability becomes even more serious. When you add it all up, you start to see the systemic threat. When these kinds of workarounds happen, it just erodes trust. This practice is a direct hit on the regulatory compliance, the integrity, and the fundamental trustworthiness that the whole SEPA architecture is built on. This table really shows the core technical problem. SEPA schemes were built for one job, handling payments within SEPA. They simply do not have the data fields required to meet international standards, like the FATF's Recommendation 16, which demands full transparency on cross-border payments. Trying to force an international payment through a SEPA rail is the definition of a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't work. So, given how serious all these risks are, you can bet the EPC is not taking this lightly. So what are the actual consequences for not complying? And more importantly, what is the correct, compliant way to handle these international payments? The EPC has laid out a pretty clear escalation path. It starts with a private warning, but if the problem persists, they can report the PSP to national authorities and even the new EU Anti-Money Laundering Authority. And the ultimate penalty? Getting kicked out of the schemes completely. But look, the EPC isn't just pointing out what's wrong, they're also pointing to the solution that they've already built. There is a proper, compliant, and ready-to-use way to handle these international instant payments. And that solution is the one-leg Instant Credit Transfer Scheme, or SCT Inst. It was specifically designed from the ground up to carry all the necessary data for international transfers. This makes sure there's full transparency, that it meets global compliance standards, and it lines up perfectly with the G20's roadmap for improving cross-border payments. And, this isn't just some theoretical fix. Since it launched back in November 2023, the SCT Inst scheme already has 96 adherents. That shows real, growing industry adoption. The right tool for the job is there, and people are starting to use it. So, we end on this critical question. This letter from the EPC is basically a final call for everyone to review their processes. It's time to make sure that all your international flows are going through the right channels. The message couldn't be clearer. Full compliance is not optional.